Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us in this special broadcast celebrating Africa Day here on New Central Television, where we put Africa first. And we've been talking about looking at the history, economics, peace and prosperity in different parts of Africa. Now it's time for us to look at economic integration for African prosperity. And joining us to discuss this in this segment, we have live from Nairobi, Kenya, Josphat Machagua is an economist, an economic consultant. Thank you very much. Join us on the broadcast. We also have from Yaoundé in Cameroon, Dr. Pisso Nseke is a lecturer and public relations executive. Thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast, and happy Africa Day to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Now, I'd like to start with Dr. Nseke. If you look at Africa, it's one of the richest continents in the world, mineral rich and abound with so much natural resources and abundant rainfall and fertile land. So why hasn't this, looking at 60 years post-independence for most African countries, translated to prosperity for the people?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. And we can look at it from either structural reasons and also from external reasons. And when we talk about structural reasons, we can say that the fact that Africa as a whole has had a lot of political instability, corruption. It has had also problems of high unemployment. And generally speaking, it's not been very organized as the other regions or economic regions of the world. And when I talk about external influence, we shouldn't forget that there has been continuous neo-colonial influence on African economies. I'm talking about the colonial influence from, or the neo-colonial influence from former colonial masters, which has hampered economic growth of certain regions of Africa.
Even the Bretton Woods institutions, I mean, if I may add, even the Bretton Woods institutions.
Exactly. You remember very well, like during the 90s, the Bretton Woods Institutes, they forced on the Africans some kind of structural adjustment
program.
But at the end of the day, these structural adjustments turned out to be counterproductive and ushering in a new culture of corruption, because there are many countries like Cameroon that saw a high rise of corruption during that period because of these structural adjustments. So these are certain examples of external influence.
All right, well, we're still looking at the issue of economic integration, especially for the prosperity of Pan-African growth. I would do stay tuned to our guests, that is Josphat Machagua and Dr. Pisso Nseke, while we take a look at this wonderful package which has been collated by the New Central TV crew. We'll be right back.
Africa has for decades suffered setbacks in its economy. This is largely due to political instability, insecurity, isolated efforts at tackling bottlenecks in commerce, and so on. This has whittled its influence in global economic activities and clogged plans for its countries to integrate operations transnationally. In order to reposition the continent into becoming a dominant player in the global arena, consultations were held and preparations were made by policy organs of the African Union, which then adopted the Agenda 2063 document, the first 10-year implementation plan, in June 2015 in South Africa. This robust plan gave birth to the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and part of the objectives are to create a single market for goods and services, facilitated by movement of persons, in order to deepen the economic integration of the African continent. Are Africans even aware of this somewhat luscious initiative?
It's about this trade agreement between African countries within Africa, them doing buying and selling of their product, natural resources between each other. And that also increases their GDP as well.
Yeah, I know about them, like they're into trading between the Africans. They bring unity between the Africa and they reduce tariff.
It's all about, a kind of a trade that has to occur between two Africa or more countries within African space.
Adopted by the 24th AU Summit, achieving the objectives are hinged on certain factors, among which is the single African air transport market.
A lot of businesses in Africa, across various sectors, this is not unique to aviation, have a much larger cost basis than comparative businesses in more developed countries. Beyond that, it's access to infrastructure, access to markets, and a range of other things that generally make it more expensive to provide a service in Africa than it does in a larger market. And airlines are no different from that. Which means that, flying a 1-hour flight between Accra and Lagos, for example, is significantly more expensive for an airline to provide than flying a comparable flight between, say, London and Manchester.
Also, the creation of the African passport and free movement of people as part of the recommendations incorporated in the Agenda 2063 is aimed at accelerating the growth of intra-Africa trade through doubling down on commercial traffic and eliminating administrative bottlenecks.
We don't know enough about one another. Nigerians don't know enough about Kenyans. Kenyans don't know enough about Cambodia, about Gabonians. So because we don't know about one another, it's very difficult for us to trade or exchange services.
Some certain type of goods are readily available, but in some countries it's not available. So such an agreement now will make it easier for country that's lagging behind in that goods to go and import from the country that has abundance of that goods.
It gives this strong bond between them and also eliminates national tariffs between two countries. Yeah, it makes trading very, very easy, and there's this.
All right, you're still on to the special broadcast celebrating Africa Day. We're talking about the lustrous efforts by the African continent to elevate the sufferings of the people and, of course, grow the economy. And we still have with us Josphat, Machagua, and Dr. Pisso Nseke. So I'll start with you now, Josphat, because I know that recently the African Development Bank, that's the AFDB, chaired by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, has recently approved 1.5 billion emergency fund to elevate the sufferings of food insecurity, especially caused by the Ukraine and Russia war. How far do you think this will go for Africa as a continent when we're looking at growing the economy of Africa?
I would say Habari Sana from Kenya. And investment in agriculture has been a key tenet for Africa because we suffer inherent challenges in food security or food system to that effect. So that one is a very good move. Currently in the East African region or the Horn of Africa, we are experiencing drought, which has really pushed the food prices up and the overall inflation. So investment in food is very important, especially in climate smart agriculture, because African agriculture is inherently subsistence, and we don't incorporate technology in order to boost production and also to boost agro-processing. You'll find, for example, in my country, Kenya, the average age of a farmer is 60 years, which is quite unfortunate. So this one is a very good move. And I would also suggest another way that we can also increase efficiency in food production is incorporating youths, because most of the agriculture is done by our parents, people who are above 60 years, 70 years. So incentivizing the youths to join agriculture is important because they are better off at absorbing technology and any technological advances, and they tend to be more creative and to any technological advancements. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Josphat. Now, Dr. Nseke, the African Union did come up with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. AFTA is being dubbed as one tool that will accelerate intra-Africa trade while boosting its trading positions on the global scale and also helping the economies of a lot of countries. Looking at your country, Cameroon, what offerings, how can it take advantage of AFTA, and how can AFTA really help in bringing about economic development to different countries?
Well, the first thing we have to understand is that after, in theory, is the biggest free trade zone agreement in the world. And this agreement is going to accelerate the economic development of Africa as a whole. Now, that is in theory, but in practice, we know that there are a lot of obstacles that have hampered this economic will, or the will, political will of African countries to come together. And some of these obstacles could be seen just from the fact that we don't have the freedom of movement of goods and services as maybe the other regional economic communities. You know, for us to be able to accelerate or to implement these free trade zone agreement that can accelerate the GDP, that can increase employment, that can increase South-South trade between African countries, we need to really work on the practicalities. And some of these practicalities have to do with the freedom of people and goods. You're all aware that it is cheaper for somebody to trade and move to Europe and other places of the world than to move in Africa, which is, it doesn't make sense. So,
but the idea is that after we'll change that. It's in implementation, like you said. It's not just on paper.
It's step by step, but to be honest, in practice, we're still to see practical or concrete efforts. It's true we've seen the political will, we've seen from the diplomatic level, but in practice, it's where the people are still having difficulty seeing the fruits of this agreement. It's still being implemented. So we're still in the early stages, and it's still difficult to tell the real consequences.
All right, while we're looking at economic growth now, Josphat, I know that the president in its long-term development agenda brought about the Vision 2030 in Kenya, that is Uhuru Kenyatta, and he emphasized on manufacturing, food security, affordable housing in Kenya, and universal healthcare. Now, he's in his last tenure, of course, where we know that Kenya is preparing for elections. So how well would you say Uhuru Kenyatta has been able to go in the line of this Vision 2030?
Thank you very much. I would say Kenya started with Vision 2030 in order to attain economic development and transition Kenya from a lower income country to a upper middle income country by 2030. Vision 2030 is implemented using 5-year medium-term plan. We are currently in MTP3 with Big Four agenda as the main focus. The Big Four agenda is almost coming to an end, and we'll have MTP4 starting in July 1st of this year. In Kenya, the financial year starts at July 1st. And I would say Big Four agenda has been a mixed bag. We have been able to attain some objectives, some we haven't been able to attain. Kenya has been, the Kenyan economy has been resilient. I would say it has been resilient, especially with COVID-19. Our economy contracted by 0.3% in 2020, but it was able to rebound by 7.5% in 2021, which is quite impressive. However, we have been experiencing challenges, especially in manufacturing and agriculture. Our manufacturing, the share of manufacturing to GDP is going down. Vision 2030 had envisioned our manufacturing to be 15% of GDP, but currently the share of manufacturing to GDP is around 7.58%, and our share of agriculture is also going down. And we have been having inconsistencies in terms of agricultural production because we are susceptible to climate change and the vagaries of the weather. However, we still have something to look up to, especially in regards to fintech and services, which Kenya is doing quite well, and especially in the financial sector. Our financial sector is doing extremely well. Our tier 1 banks, Equity, KCB, Cooperative Bank, they are registered supernormal profits. And also our tech space is also doing quite well. Kenya is ranked third after South Africa and Nigeria in terms of absorbing investment in fintech, which is quite good. And also, in regards to employment, the number of young people employed in the formal sector has been growing gradually, not at the rate that we want, but has been growing gradually, but we still have problems with informality. The economy is inherently informal, up to between 80 and around 80% of our economy is informal. Okay. And also another challenge we've been having is the informal economy has been growing at a faster rate than the formal economy. And that one is a challenge that the government has been trying to achieve. To some extent, we have been able to succeed, but there are some areas that we need to pull up our socks, especially in regards to availing affordable credit to MSMEs in the country, especially in agriculture and agro-processing, and
thank you.
wholesale and trade.
Thank you, Josphat. Dr. Nseke, what can Africans learn from Kenya? A lot of African countries are resource-based economies. The Kenyan economy is service-based, and they don't suffer from the resource costs of having just one product or monoproduct economy, and they depend heavily on it, which makes them susceptible to global shocks. What do we need to do in order to have a more broad-based economy and also stop us from being the dumping ground of finished products from Europe and Asia?
Well, if we have to follow the Kenyan model, we can see that the Kenyan model is very diversified in the sense that they're dealing with, you have like mobile money technology, you have tourism. I think most African countries, especially the Western and the Central African countries that are very rich in resources and commodities, they need to try to diversify. And I know it's difficult for some countries to apply this, but with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, it showed that the countries that were able to resist, or the most resilient economies, were the ones that were most diversified. So when I'm talking about diversity, I'm talking about living from commodities to maybe tourism, moving also to new forms of technology. It could be blockchain technology, fintech. These are things that young Africans are attracted to. So I think most countries now should try to diversify their economies, which would maybe help us to be better prepared for future external shocks.
All right, Dr. Nseke, while we're still looking at diversifying the economy, how competitive is the African market? Because we see most times African products are not necessarily bought from the international market. I mean, if you look at South Africa's president, he was complaining about the vaccine lab created in South Africa and the fact that they were not having enough buyers. So how can we make the African market more competitive?
Well, I think one of the first steps has to deal with the image. And you all know that African countries still have that negative media, or the media that is projected in the world. I've been to so many parts of the world, like in Asia. The image they have of Africa and its products are always negative. Africa is mostly known for everything negative in the book. So I think what you're doing and what other countries are trying to do is to improve the image that is projected about Africa, to show the positive side. The other things that we can try to do is to encourage people meeting each other, because by coming together, it breaks barriers. You know that in South Africa, for example, there were issues of xenophobia. Maybe that is why certain, I will not say certain African countries, but other countries maybe might feel reluctant to trade with maybe South Africa. I also want to talk about the Ghanaian example, in the sense where African countries have to move from just producing commodities by trying to transform them to finished products. And not only transform them to finished products, but also trying to compete. Because if we have the best product, if we have the raw materials, why aren't we able to compete maybe with certain of these Western or
yes.
worldwide companies. You know, it doesn't make sense that Africans will produce cocoa but we're not capable of selling chocolate, or we're not able to sell chocolate better than Switzerland. So these are some of the steps I think that African countries can do.
Or even refine our own petroleum, like the case of Nigeria. Just before we wrap things up, I would like to bring in Josphat here. And it's instructive that we have this discussion on Africa Day. It's not just Africa, it's not just Kumbaya on paper, you know, everything is fine, but we need to go into the fine details. The average cost of importing a container in Africa is about $2,492 compared with $935 in East Africa. That's one. Number two, it's easier for a European citizen to move around Africa with no hassle. A lot of them have a visa-free or visa on arrival. Then me, a Nigerian, if I choose to move around Africa, I still need to go apply for visa. That's two. And then transport services. I mean, I've heard tales of people flying from South Africa to all the way to Lisbon to connect on a flight to Angola. So what do we need to do beyond, you know, just paying lip service to integration of Africa to really actualize these things and have a more united Africa, economically and otherwise?
Thank you very much. That's quite a good question. And the biggest challenge we have been having as African countries is lack of capital. And this is a problem that inherent across different regions. Let me first start with looking at the transport sector, especially the air transport. Yes, that is true. The air transport within the African region is siloed. We have very big bottlenecks between Anglophone, Francophone, and Lusophone countries. And this is also extends to trade. Lusophone countries tend to trade with each other, Anglophone and also Francophone countries. We don't have this interoperability where Anglophone countries can trade more with Lusophone countries. And this has been the challenge, especially in regards to transport. Actually, here in East Africa, it's costlier to travel from Kenya, Nairobi to Rwanda than from Nairobi to Dubai. And the distance is almost 4 times to Dubai. And one of the challenges is because we don't have open skies. There's a Yamoussoukro agreement to enhance air transport in Africa, but we have not been able to implement it. Yes, it has been a very big challenge. And air transport, one of the biggest costs or the biggest share of air transport is fuel, cost of fuel. And how can we reduce that? By buying fuel as a team. One country I really like to emphasize that has been doing quite well is Ethiopia. Ethiopian Airlines has been performing quite well. It's the best performing, one of the best performing in the world. But when you look at the other African airlines, especially my country, KQ, the pride of Africa, the company has been experiencing or has been realizing supernormal losses. And I think also that's the case with the South African airlines. And one of the biggest challenges is because we don't have economies of scale. We find most of these airlines will go when they are maybe 20%, 30% full. Why? Because it's costlier to travel using those transport. And this has been a very big challenge in regards to promoting African integration and after. So this is one area that countries can look at, reducing the trade barriers in regards to air transport. The other challenge that African countries have been experiencing in regards to lack of capital is capital markets. Apart from Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which is the largest in Africa and top 20 in the world, other stock exchanges have been having a very big challenge in regards to listing. For example, in my country, Kenya, Nairobi Securities Exchange, we have been having an IPO drought. Since 2015, we have not been able to list even a single company. And that is quite unfortunate. And why am I talking about listing? Is because Africa is highly informalized. And we need to create an environment that will enable informal firms to be formalized, which is one step towards moving towards listing and access to capital. Because investors cannot invest in informal funds because they don't have any sense of accountability in regards to the way these businesses do their financials. So,
all right, Josphat, if we look at this now, you're talking about a conducive environment for businesses to thrive, especially on the African continent. We can go on and on, especially as we do want economic growth on the African continent. But I must say a very big thank you to you, Josphat Machagua, and of course, Dr. Pisso Nseke, for shedding so much light on how best to grow the economy on the African continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
And you too.
All right.